every now and then you have to make a recipe to remind people that you are that girl or man or whoever you are, but that you can cook. I know we get into ruts. We cook the same thing. We cook easy meals during our busy weeks, but sometimes we got to just slow down and remember the good stuff. Today, I am sharing one of those recipes for you. I say all the time, my husband didn't marry me for my cooking, but this one may actually have won him over. I'm sharing my delicious chicken and dressing recipe. If this is your first time making one, I am going to share some easy tips really that anyone can do. If it's your 100th, just still stay tuned. You're gonna like some of my additions to this one. Okay, so we're gonna start our recipe off here with a whole chicken. This is definitely not your granny's recipe. To me, the star of the show is going to be the dressing. So I keep the chicken pretty simple. Now I have this dried off and cleaned up. I am going to just season really well with some salt, the inside of that cavity here. And then I am going to add a little bit of olive oil on top to help my seasoning stick. Now you could do any parts of the chicken that you have. That's what's so wonderful about this recipe. It is very forgiving, very versatile, and that the flavors will still pretty much turn out the same. I like whole chickens because for my family, the price on it is much better. And my the way I grocery shop and meal plan is pretty impromptu, so I just use whatever things I keep on hand, and this usually is one of them. Now I am going to do this today in the Instapot, which is the reason why I'm going to go ahead and add this oil on to keep my seasonings on as it goes through the pressure cooker. But you could, of course, just do this on a pot on the stove and cook it all day until the pieces fall off. But I'm just seasoning this up. You can use whatever seasonings that you want. Like I said, I am keeping it pretty simple here, just with some salt. I got some garlic powder on there, and I'm gonna do some onion powder. No measurements here, just go with what you feel like. And then I will do some poultry seasoning. Another thing when you are cooking with simple meals, simple ingredients, I like to do blends like the poultry seasoning just to keep it simple. Instead of pulling out a whole bunch of margarine, thyme, and all those things, sage, this blend has it all combined. So saves us a little time there. And then the last thing I want to do is add a little bit of paprika for some color. Not that it matters, but here we go. And then we'll get this ready to go inside of the Instapot. Okay, here I have my trivet in my Instapot. This is totally optional, but it makes it easy for me to take my whole chicken out. I'm gonna add about a cup of water in here. And then I have a couple of bay leaves that have broken up, and then a little bit of black peppercorn. And then I am just going to get in some salt. Now you could go crazy with this, add fresh herbs, anything you want here. Again, I'm going to keep it really simple and easy today, but this essentially will be our broth that we will use later for the dressing. So now we're going to go ahead and get in that chicken that we seasoned. Okay, then we'll get our lid on here. And then I am going to pressure cook this on high for 25 minutes. Now my chicken is about 4.5 to 5 pounds. But like I said, you could totally just cook this, roast this if you wanted to. You could do it on the stove top. I like the Instapot. I don't have to heat up the kitchen on this step. And it makes it really simple, nothing for me to look at. But of course, cold day in winter, I will definitely put this in a Dutch pot on the stove. But for now, we'll go with the Instapot, make it really easy. So we'll let this go for about 25 minutes and then let it do a natural release for about another 15 minutes. This has released. We'll go ahead and pull the chicken out here. And you see why I like to use the trivet, because it just makes it easy to pull out. And then the rest of this is going to be our delicious broth that we will use on the next few steps. I really like to use the Instant Pot on this step. It just makes rendering my own chicken broth very easy. To me, the flavor is superior, but you absolutely could just use store-bought on this step if you wanted to. I actually use this method to keep broth on hand in my freezer so that I have it ready for soups as well. Now, as you can see, this rendered out 4 cups of liquid with just the 1 cup that I put in. And again, we'll use this for the gravy later on. Okay, so we'll chat while we're getting some veggies prepped. Here I have a couple stalks of celery. I do a couple in this kind of batch, and really for my family of 8, this will feed a lot. So if you do a family of 4, still do this particular recipe. You'll have leftovers for sure. But I mean, honestly, this is one of those things where the leftovers really taste good. Sometimes flavors get to marry and sit. And to me, the leftover dressing is the best part. Now, I usually make homemade dressing for my, homemade cornbread for my dressing, which I will show you in just a second. I already made this the night before. I like to use old cornbread for dressing. For me, it has more flavor once you add the broths and the butter and all the other ingredients to go with it. To me, it tastes better. It stands up. It can get a little too mushy and soggy for my liking. Now, the shortcuts that I took today would be making the chicken in the Instant Pot, and then I made my dressing ahead of time. These are kind of like the kitchen rituals that I've created for myself in the kitchen, even though I am in a busy season of life. And I continue to say that. Maybe I'll share more about that, maybe I won't, but I am in a busy season, so I've had to get creative, and so I can still be able to provide my family with homemade meals, because that's important to me. And my kids coming to the kitchen, you know, being enticed by the smell of something delicious, that's important to me too. And I know these are things that they'll remember. You know, some people leave a legacy of things. I definitely feel like my legacy with my children is going to be memories. Memories of me around the home. Memories of me in the kitchen for sure. You know, when you're a stay-at-home mom, you have 6 kids, we homeschool, you know, so we spend a lot of time together. And I cook 3 meals a day, so a lot of their memories will be of me in the kitchen. Over to the stove. We have some butter, about a stick of butter, and then I have the veggies that I chopped. And I like to do a saute on this. Now, you could do this as soft or as crunchy as you like. I do actually like a little bite. I like to taste a little bite when it is inside of the dressing. So I just do mine maybe till it barely softens up here. And you could also add garlic if you want it. I don't usually add garlic to my dressing because to me the flavor is a little bit overpowering. So sometimes I will add some fresh herbs here if I have it. Not today, like I said, keeping it real simple. So we're just gonna let this go for a few minutes, and then we'll put everything together, and then stay tuned because I am also going to share with you a gravy that I like to pour over the dressing with. Okay, here is my funnest part. I absolutely love making dressing. It is one of my favorite dishes to make and eat. So I have my 12-inch cornbread here. I will link my cornbread recipe. The only change I made to this is I did not add any sugar to the mix this time. So you could cut this if you want. I know some people like to do small pieces, cubes. That's cute. I don't do that. That's not my thing. I just like to crumble it up. Part of it is because it's fun. I'll be honest. I like touching things. I like the texture of things. So this is fun for me. Plus, I always have my kids come in the kitchen and help me do this, and that's part of our memories too. This is dry. It is the way that I wanted it, so that it can absorb the flavor of the broth. I find that when it's a really moist cornbread, it doesn't do as well. It just ends up being mushy and tasteless, in my opinion. So if you haven't tried it with a drier or day old cornbread, go ahead and try it. My grandmother told me back in the day, that's how dressing came up anyway. They would do it with leftover bread. Again, you could cube this or put it in the food processor, I guess, if you want it. I like different pieces and textures, so I don't go too fine with this. But this is one of those things you really can't mess up. As long as your flavor is good, you really can't mess this up. Now, I know everybody does the dressing a little different, and thank you so much for taking the time to check out the way that I do mine here. Okay, and then stay tuned for some of the upcoming holiday recipes. I plan on sharing how to make the dressing totally from scratch. No store-bought ingredients, just to make it a little bit healthier. Different flavors, different change. I'll show you how I make my breadcrumbs with some sourdough bread. For today, we're doing just my traditional dressing that my family does. Okay, so there is my dressing. There's my cornbread all done up. Now I'll show you what else I add here. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and go in with those vegetables that we sauteed. And I put the butter and everything in. To me, it helps get color on the dressing and flavor, of course. Optional, very flavorful, however. I like to do a cream of chicken soup and a cream of mushroom. To me, it's not much taste different. So you could do both cream of mushroom, 2 cream of chicken. You could do cream of celery. It's really up to you and whatever you have. But for the mushroom, I like to actually take a couple tablespoons out. And I will show you what I do with that in just a little bit. We'll go ahead and dump both of these in. Next up, we're going to do about half of that delicious broth that we made. And then we'll reserve the other half for the gravy I'll show you how to make. So I like to give this a good mix around before I add the chicken in. Now you could totally stop here. This would be a delicious dressing. Okay, now I have here, and this is optional as well. This is what my family does, what I like. Again, I'll show you how I do this without this. But this is the stuffing mix that I like to use. For this recipe, I'm gonna use about half the bag. Now what I do is I freeze this and make dressing another day. And actually what I do is I'll buy a lot of these when they go on sale around the holidays. And like I said, I just stick them in the freezer and use them whenever the mood strikes. I am one of those people who I will create a meal plan for my family for the week and then have a craving and totally mess up my own meal plan. But that's why I like to keep certain stuff on hand, just in case by some odd chance a craving comes, I can be ready. And I like to surprise my husband with dinner. I rarely tell him what dinner is going to be, so it's always a surprise when he comes home. So he comes home to something like chicken and dressing, he'll be very pleased. The smell will welcome him when he comes through the door. Okay, so here's my consistency. I add a little bit more broth. You can also add water. Now, I don't need too much salt here because I heavily salted that broth that I made, but be sure to test for seasonings at this point because depending on what kind of broth you use, you may need seasonings. Now, the only other thing I'm going to add here today is poultry seasoning. Now, this already has my sage, my thyme, marjoram, things like that. So I don't have to use a lot of different seasonings and blends. This makes it really easy. but you really could go all out, fresh herbs, all kind of herbs, whatever you like. And then I'm gonna go ahead and get that chicken that we made earlier in here. Now I picked this off the bones and I saved the bones and the carcass because I am going to use it to make another batch of broth. I stick it in freezer bags until I get maybe 2 or 3 more whole chickens, and then I make 2 batches of homemade stock. Now I do probably 2/3 of this because I like to keep some for the gravy. Now I am one of those people with my chicken and dumplings and with my chicken and dressing, I really like the other parts of it more than the chicken. So, but you could add as much of it as you like. So if you want more chicken, add more chicken. I'm a dumplings fan. Let me know. Do you like the chicken or the dumplings? Leave me a comment. I will bypass my chicken and eat all of my dumplings out. And it's kind of like that with this. I like to have little bites of chicken, but I really like the dressing. Last thing I'm gonna do is here, get a little egg in it. Completely optional, but I like the way the texture ends up when I add egg in. But I believe when I was growing up, I don't think my mom put an uncooked egg in. All right, that's it. I'm gonna get ready to put this in the pan, and then I'll show you how I do the gravy. Okay, let's get to the gravy. So I have some butter in my saucepan here. Get some flour in. I'm gonna let this cook down a little bit, get that flour taste off. Now this is just a chicken gravy today that we're gonna use with that chicken broth that we made. If you're looking for a giblet gravy, if you're gonna do this for the holidays, I will link my giblet gravy recipe as well. Very similar to this one, except I use turkey necks in it. Okay, I think that's good enough. So we will go ahead and add in that chicken broth that we made earlier. Turn up my fire here. So I'm just gonna let it come up to boil. Go ahead and add some seasonings. Now remember, I reserved that cream of mushroom earlier, so we're gonna get that in here. This is optional. The gravy recipe is still delicious, exactly as is. I just kind of like to tie all of my flavors together, and since I have the flavor already inside of the dressing, adding it on top is just another layer. Building layers here. So still going to keep stirring so that we don't get any lumps, but I'm also going to allow this to come up to a bubble so it will thicken. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and season a little bit here, some black pepper. Now, I happen to like a lot of black pepper in this. And then I won't salt just yet. I'm going to taste it first because, like I said, I had a good amount of salt inside of that broth. And then also the cream of mushroom soup has a lot of salt also. So here I'm going to add a touch of poultry seasoning. Again, to tie together the flavors that I put inside of the dressing. So that's about thick enough for me. This is always also going to thicken as it stands, but as you can see, it's thickened up. Good amount there. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is add that chicken that we reserved in earlier. This is optional, but I like it. And then I chopped up some boiled egg that I'm going to get in. Again, optional, but it's absolutely delicious. So if you haven't tried it before, go ahead and try it. Okay, and like I said, we'll let this continue to thicken as it sits while we're waiting to pull that dressing out. I'll show you exactly how I serve it.